There is Chifa. Hello, hello. Excited to be here, everybody. A long time coming. We're going to make introductions here, but probably the only familiar face you would see is Chifa. So if you want to go ahead and welcome everybody, set the stage as everyone's rolling in, and then we will go face first into an exciting overview of the LA and US market.
Yes, thank you so much, Scott. Good evening to everyone in the Netherlands, and good morning to everyone in LA. I think most of you probably know me. For those who don't, my name is Chifa Quist, and I am the sector lead for sports strategy and partnerships here at the Netherlands Business Support Office in LA. And before we get started on this really exciting first webinar, I want to talk a bit about how we came to this. This series was really born out of conversations. Over the years, our office has spoken to countless Dutch companies who all are looking to enter the LA sports market and are looking to get into LA 28, of course. And we've had multiple trade missions where some of you have also joined. And one thing really stood out is that companies that succeed here are usually the ones who are prepared. And so we also see that LA currently is in the middle of their golden decade, as they call it. This summer, we will have the World Cup. Then we have the Super Bowl next year and the Olympics coming up in 2028. So the market is very vast. There are enough opportunities, and we really want to make sure that you guys are ready to take them on and be as successful as you can. Then one thing is that this webinar series is the first of three. We will have one more on the 4th of June and one on July 2nd. And we organized this together with the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, the Orange Sports Forum, the Royal Dutch Football Organization, and the Consulate General of the Netherlands in San Francisco. Then thank you, and really happy to start this first one off with our partner Profluence. I'll let you guys introduce yourself. Thank you.
I love it. All right. Well, hello everybody. To echo Chief of State or sentiment, good evening or good morning. My name is Scott Garber, co-founder of Profluence Sports, a platform really bringing together the innovation and capital that is helping shape what the future of sport looks like through media, community, and capital. And today we're excited to go ahead and have a dynamic conversation. One, helping to share insights that we are learning and seeing here in a macro US market, and then what's going on specifically in LA. We're going to touch on all things capital, all things women's sports, all things NIL. And as Chifa and I were building out this presentation, so much of this was geared towards how do we get smarter when looking at opportunities in the US beyond major tentpole moments and the big four sporting teams that naturally we're all drawn to. There is a massive, massive shakeup happening, and there's an over-index of capital that is flowing into the sport asset class. So whether you're a service partner, whether you're a sports tech founder, whether you're a league or team looking to break in, our goal today is to give some high-level overviews, but more importantly, give some deep knowledge that you can start to take away and apply back to your business. The last thing before I go ahead and we start to make introductions is as we continue to build out our relationship with the Dutch government, with Chifa, Pim, and the rest of the crew, we're excited to be able to go ahead and extend opportunities for you as the builders that go beyond this podcast or beyond this webinar, for you to get ongoing support, resources, introductions to help push your business forward as you break into the US market. I have a one pager I'm going to pull up, but before I do so, I think it's important to go ahead and just get to know some of the folks that we have on the call today. I'm going to kick it over first to Andrew Petcash. If you guys are on LinkedIn in any capacity, I'm sure you've seen his character, which is now moved to a real picture. But Andrew is the engine that has built Profluence and really earned the trust of the market. Andrew, give us a little background on yourself and some of the things that you're excited to cover as we dive into this conversation.
Thanks, Scott. And I can't see everyone, but looks like a good turnout. So I appreciate you being here. I've been building in the digital media side for 15 years, starting as a teenager from YouTube channels to websites to social media, and really honed in on the sports ecosystem over the last couple of years. So I've put out over 300 reports, diving into every different area of the industry, from sportainment to padel to entering the US market or whatever it is, and have had 300 plus podcasts. So feel like over those last couple of years, I've gotten to know a lot of the movers and shakers and got a really good perspective on how people are thinking about it. So just relaying a lot of those messages, and then through Profluence and our community with the 1,000 plus members, and then our capital arm where we've done a handful of investments, we have skin in the game as well, I like to say. So it's not just like we're talking about it and putting out reports, like we've actually tried to shape it a little bit ourselves. So I'm excited to relay some of those learnings and hope it's helpful.
Fantastic. No, and thanks for what you're doing for the space, and excited to, from a high level, really get under the hood and understand where you see opportunities for companies to be able to break into this ever fast changing market. Dustin Dries, managing partner at Profluence Capital. Give everybody a little background of your tenure and what you're seeing and excited about in the space to set the tone.
Yeah, absolutely. So, excited to be here. My background is kind of from an institutional lens. Started my career on Wall Street, quickly moved into the investment side of things around sports media and entertainment. Excuse me, sports media and entertainment. Invested in a lot of youth sports stuff 10 years ago, before U.S. Congress was talking about everyone being angry about investing in U.S. sports. And built a couple of really large businesses there, sitting on the board on some of these companies. A business called Plan Sports that was streaming for high school sports in the US. Another business called GoFan that's ticketing for high school sports in the US. And then also spent some time investing sort of up and down the capital stack in a couple of professional teams, as well as like an IMG Academy, a lot around sort of these kind of, I'll call them below the big four, big five leagues, as well as everything that's happening in college sports. Last fund I was at, we were doing a lot in and around the college space, and did the deal with the Big 12, as everyone's talking about private equity entering the college sports space in the US. But joined Profluence because I was looking for deals in that community, and it was the right place where founders were building and where I saw, I think, the most opportunity. One of the things, to Scott's point, that we're most excited about, I think, is just the proliferation of capital that's finally come into the market. People talk about sports as an asset class, and it's very broad, but there's so much money going in, especially when it comes in from the big guys, the Apollos, the Blackstones, the KKRs of the world, that forces professionalization in a lot of these organizations that, were maybe a little bit more family run previously. And so we think that benefits a lot of the smaller businesses, the startups, the tech-enabled businesses that are providing infrastructure and picks and shovels around what's actually happening in the big leagues. And so that's one of the things that we're really excited about. So excited to talk to everybody.
I love it. And I think, when we think about, building outside of the US, and as we break in, one of the things that we, have learned through working with other agencies is that a lot of the resources come through government. And so today we're excited to go ahead and start to open up, how do we penetrate different private markets, both on the capital side, on the development side, to be able to create new opportunities and pathways for your business to come in and find commercial viability, far beyond just what is provided in some of the trade missions. So Dustin, we're going to lean on you from a capital lens. Excited to go ahead and bring the two some non-Profluence members in. Hands down, the coolest lady on this call, at least from our screen. I can't speak to who's over in the Netherlands, but Jamie Messler, so excited for you to be joining us. Please give everybody just a little background on your tenure in sport and how you're expressing yourself and the opportunities that we're going to unpack in women's sports, where you're spending a lot of time now.
No, for sure. And I'm not sure if it's a compliment if I'm the coolest woman on this call when I'm the only woman on the call, but I'll take it.
Fair enough. But that wasn't the intention.
I'm just playing. I've been in sports my whole career. I actually started, I was just sharing with someone because I'm dating myself. I was in representation for 17 years, and I started on the team at IMG back in the day, representing Pete Sampras and Martina Hingis and Marcela Rios. But I left IMG early days to help start an agency called Excel Sports Management, which is now one of the biggest agencies in the world. But I was the first employee, and we started it with mostly representing NBA players. So our starting five, and this is also dating, but our starting five was Paul Pierce, Jason Kidd, Tyson Chandler, Lamar Odom, and Jerry Stackhouse. And so my main goal was always to build brands, maximize earning potential off the field of play. And then I ultimately became the CMO, and it became a bigger agency. Derek Jeter's agent became a partner. Tiger Woods' agent became a partner. And so I was there for over 15 years, and then ultimately left in 2014 to start a company called the Players Tribune, which was really about innovating with athlete-driven storytelling. So we started it because there was a white space in that field. All my clients wanted me to build their brand and tell their stories, but there was no trust with the media. And so we created a platform. We raised money during Derek's last year playing on the Yankees, and we launched the day after his last game. And I think we just really disrupted the sports media landscape. Everyone from Kobe announced his retirement on the platform. It was really about giving athletes an opportunity to own their narrative, to really telling stories that, globally, of stories that you wouldn't know. And it told us a lot about story first. And when you have the tools to tell your stories, like, that is really the way in. And we ended up creating a show called Untold that we helped develop and sell to Netflix, which is, I think, also early days and one of the first things that Netflix did in the sports space. And I say all that to say is it's led me to where I am today, which is really, I've been invested in women's sports for the last 10 years. I have a lot of experience. I'm a builder. I have a lot of experience raising money, building community, building brands. And today I have a partner in Laura Gentili, who started ESPNW and was the CMO at ESPN. Michelle Akers, who's one of the most prolific women's soccer players of all time, and Cheryl Miller, who's also on the Mount Rushmore of women's basketball. And together we started a company called Storied Sports. We're still building, we're raising, but the goal is to really tell the stories of some of the best women athletes of all time, both playing today as well as the women that have built the sports. And we launched a podcast called the 85ers, which was on the first ever U.S. women's national team, presented by Adidas. And we're building every day. And our goal is, while this is the fastest and maybe biggest growth industry in sports right now, in women's sports, we want to be like that infrastructure and storytelling layer in the industry. So I'll
fantastic. And Jamie, it's so great to have you. And as we, unpack a couple layers of this conversation, excited to start to understand, if you were on the outside looking in, where are the opportunities in women's sports? And it feels like there's a lower barrier to entry to go ahead and gain commercial viability that has the same visibility and has the same upward momentum as the rest of the sporting ecosystem, if not more. So we're going to unpack that. And then Chase Garrett, you're going to bring us home from the south of France, which is not where you normally reside, but, excited for you to give your introduction and paint some color to what is going on in the NIL ecosystem as we're still trying to figure out that here in the US, but we're going to try and unpack it for our international friends. So Chase, give us a little introduction and background to yourself, and then we're going to get going.
Thanks, Scott. Hopefully I'm coming through. I'm on a little bit of a, unique Wi-Fi system here. Been involved in sports marketing my whole career. Was an athlete, agent, and then I ran the athlete marketing with Red Bull for about 7 years, and then started a company called Icon Source. I saw there was an opportunity to connect more brands with athletes, so we built a marketplace focused initially on pro athletes and brands, and then moved into the college NIL space, doing the first NIL deal with the Cabinet Twins and Boost Mobile. Built that up. We just raised our Series B. I joined the venture capital firm that we did the deal with. And so been involved in putting deals together with pro athletes the majority of my career. And then most recently, a lot of NIL deal flow. And the NIL space is very bizarre. There's a lot of money flowing through it with very unique terms. But I think there's a huge opportunity there for brands to enter a space and build with an athlete. You know, when I was at Red Bull, we were always very focused on connecting with an athlete before they were the superstar. And so now it allows brands to enter that category before they've already had their, draft day or whatever it is. And so it's an exciting time to really grow and develop with an individual. I think you can also do a lot of really exciting deals across a wide landscape of athletes that have very local touch points. And when you look at athletes, a lot of them are considered pretty much influencers or creators, but they're very tied geographically to a region, which is important to a lot of businesses with where they are located or their distribution. And so I believe athletes bring a real physical approach to their online presence. So happy to continue to dive in on the NIL space. But yeah, we've been fortunate enough to do about 15,000 contracts in the NIL space and been deep in it for a while. So.
And congratulations. And it's so great to have a wide breadth of industry experts here. And so, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to share my screen here for a second. And typically I would do this and I would do this in 1-by-1 slides. Today, I wanted to go ahead and sort of put this one pager on there. You guys got to know us as the coaching staff, and we're going to start to navigate and unpack this ecosystem of the U.S. sporting market. We're going to put a highlight and an emphasis with some of the experts we have to cover the investment side, women's sports, name, image, and likeness. But we're going to go to slide 1 here for a second. Obviously with the Dutch and this organization being headquartered in LA and it going through its golden years, there is a ton of opportunity that is sitting there. One of the things that I wanted to call out, and Andrew, I'm going to come to you as we kick this off, is like typically when we hear folks breaking into the US, it is around these big tentpole moments or professional sports teams. And although they do hold a lot of weight, I think it is just a fraction of the opportunity that is presented. So when we look at the LA ecosystem, we have the professional sports teams, we have all the international events that's going on, we have all of the things that in the rest of the world we would know about. Andrew, I'm going to come to you, right? As we start to think about entering the US market, youth sports, what's going on at the collegiate level, the emerging leagues that are taking place, where would you, as a sports tech or infrastructure builder, be looking beyond just the obvious opportunities to partner as you're coming into the US? Give us a couple areas that you think make sense and why, based on what you're seeing from a market trend perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a handful of different ways to approach this, and there's not, one size fits all. But where I would approach this right now is I would think a little untraditionally. So most people think, hey, they want to go work with the biggest teams and leagues in the world. And obviously I view, and we have a good slide, we can probably share this post, but of the triangle of, the selling into sports teams and leagues, right? So you have at the top the NBA and NHL and, Premier League and stuff like that. And then it works into mid-tier leagues, and then it goes down into like college sports, and then eventually college and youth. So there's the most athletes or the most potential consumer spend at the bottom. And then as it works up the way, the funnel, there's the most potential spending ability at the top, but the least amount of potential clients, right? And so most people try to go to the very top of the pyramid. I think the really interesting gap right now, if you think of it through that lens, is to actually go into the middle. So there's a lot of people trying to play in youth sports, but it's very fragmented. There's a lot of people trying to play in pro sports, but again, long sales cycles and only a handful of clients. But there's so many new emerging leagues, and as Jamie's going to talk about more, all the women's sports. If you can become the picks and shovel solutions for all these emerging things, you're no longer reliant on just one league to succeed or one client to succeed. You're taking it alongside, the momentum entering the space, and you're, going along with the secular tailwind. And so to me, I would really hone in on that. And so I've seen a Profluence member who's doing a really good job right now. They're just focusing on outside the NHL. They're focusing on hockey clubs to start outside of the NHL. And so they've already landed a ton of contracts because they're just very niched in. And if you look at any super successful sports company over time, they usually start niche and start to work their way out. Now, I'll preface that with saying when you're talking to investors, you want to, and Jamie's, raised a lot of capital, so I think she can speak to this, but you have to sell it much bigger. And hey, we're just starting in hockey, but we're going to go into XYZ and we're going to hit these bigger markets. But, from an actual business lens, I would go try to find an untapped area and really go win it. And to me, right now, that would be a lot of the emerging leagues, because they'd rather use solutions than try to build it themselves or figure out how to do it themselves or through partnerships. So anyway, I can go deeper on that or whatever, but I think that's probably pretty clear.
Nope, it's great. And just a quick call out, guys. My PDF slides are not working, and so I understand the text might be a little small here. I'm just going to use this as a framework of our conversation. We're going to touch on all these points that we're talking about, and in a follow-up, I will send this one pager. So apologies for a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we're going to talk about everything that is presented here and really just use it as a framework of the conversation. So apologies about the small technical hiccup. Andrew, I'm gonna stick with you for one more, and then Jamie, it's going to naturally dovetail into you. But Andrew, when we think about how sports businesses are being built right now, we're watching an over-index of innovation, both domestically in the US and from around the rest of the world. Give us a little insight to storytelling and the digital presence on how you built on LinkedIn to start to earn the trust and really navigate the digital ecosystem. And if there's any tips or tricks that you would give to folks beyond just, using their product and pitch deck, what would that be to start to gain and garner the attention of the right decision makers here in the US market?
Yeah, and one thing I believe I've been pretty early on a lot of the media trends. I mean, I built what was the largest basketball YouTube channel in like 2009 and through 2010. So that's super early days. And so I feel like I've stayed ahead of it. There's a lot more AI slop that you're seeing now across LinkedIn. So like when I first started putting content out, I put a post 5 days a week on the sports industry since 2002 or 2022 or 2023. So, calculate that, thousands of posts. But, and I'll use it for ideas or assistance. So like I would first start with like, you really need, like people can tell quickly. So I think this goes across a lot of different areas, decks and websites and, emails. Like people do know, like it's pretty obvious if you're in the world and you're using these things all the time. So try to stay authentic to it, but then create a personalization around it as well. And you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. It's why I had a character image and not my real image for a long time, because I sort of viewed it as like, this isn't me. This is my side ego. And, I'm posting this and who cares what people say or they agree or disagree. So you have to take that, but then share sort of what you have to tie the personal angle to it as well. So if I did a triathlon, I'd post that, right? You got to mix things in. And so I view everything of add 80% value. So 80% is education and then 20% is promotion or, showcasing your wins or what you're doing, right? And so people get a good mix, but they feel like they're just getting value daily. And I think a lot of you have a ton of expertise in different things. Right. Like I was at our event in New York 2 weeks ago talking to a guy that knows injuries in sports better than anyone I've ever talked to. And I'm like, you should be putting out at least 1 or 2 posts a week going deeper on this. And then off that, though, I'll just say the biggest gap I see with founders is they don't do a good job just educating the people they already have involved in their business, especially their investors. So you should be sending broad update messages to not just investors, but people in and around the ecosystem. And I don't think people mind getting those, right? Now, you don't want them every week, or you don't want to just add people to newsletters for no reason, but like keep people up to speed. We're all busy. We've got a million different things going up, and start to mix the two of those together and focus on educating people. And then you can promote yourself and what you're really trying to get out of it on the back end. So for me, it was never, hey, I'm going to tell you what I'm building. Hey, I'm going to educate you. And then we can work you through what we're really doing. So anyway, I think that's the best strategy.
No, and really well said. And LinkedIn is one of the most powerful tools, although it's getting a little noisy, to start to be able to hone in and not just get to the right folks, but learn about the industry and show up with precision. Dustin, before I come up to you and sort of speak on the investor side, Jamie, I want to speak to the storytelling element. Obviously, it's always a little more challenging when you don't live within the landscape and understand and breathe this. And so I'm curious is, as you've been telling stories through the evolution of the professionalization of women's sports, when we think about builders that are looking to penetrate the market, let's start with just where do you see across the women's sports landscapes, opportunity and leagues or teams that are leaning into innovation to try and help bolster their position and make sure their athletes have the best platforms, their fans have the best experiences. I'm curious from the inside where you see opportunities, or you would point, some of these founders to explore in the women's sports sector.
Yeah, if you start with the storytelling piece, I think that's really important, because up until a year or two ago, the percentage of athlete stories in women's sports that have been told, the media coverage has been very low. So there's an unlimited amount of opportunity in telling those stories, but it's also like paramount for these teams and leagues to be successful that people know who these women are. So it's a really great white space, but it's also really important for the industry to thrive. So I think that's like a really great place to start. And we just, like, from a storytelling standpoint, like that's been my career is driven by that, whether it's about a brand, whether it's about a company, about an athlete. It does really come down to telling high quality stories, and it could really make or break, as a company is building. It's an important tool. And we saw that at Players Tribune. Like I always say, Kobe announced his retirement on the platform, and it literally was a top 5 story. It broke the internet for us when he did that. But 4 of the most popular stories on our platform were hockey stories. One was a women's sports story, because they're underserved, loyal fan bases, and in women's sports especially, it's underserved. And so there's incredible opportunity. There's new leagues and teams every day, which is incredible. But people need to know who these women are to start to care. And I think that's also one of the differences with men's sports and women's sports. We grew up, especially in the States, growing up being a Knicks fan or, a Giants fan. You're not growing up in the same way with women's sports, because a lot of these teams and leagues are newer. And so the opportunity to tell these stories is just really rich. And I think it's an important part of the industry. It's also really important as you're thinking about if you're investing in teams or leagues. So to understand the necessary part of infrastructure that's needed. And again, storytelling is a huge piece of that. But it's also really important to think innovatively. It's not what works for the traditional leagues is not going to work for emerging leagues. It's not going to work for women's sports. And you're seeing success in teams that are thinking that way. Like Angel City is the great example in LA that did not take a blueprint or, the playbook from traditional leagues on the men's side. And they found incredible success. And part of that is the barrier of entry for investment is so much lower for women's sports, and also for some of the emerging leagues on the men's side. So when you're getting more strategic investors, you're able to it's ripe for growth. You're getting more diversity on a cap table. So I think that's another interesting part of it in terms of the ecosystem of women's sports. And just really you're starting to see that with the volleyball league here. Love One, like the way they're raising money for the different teams, the diversity of the people on the cap table is driving so much promotion and marketability that you wouldn't see otherwise. So I think there's just a massive opportunity. I mean, LA is obviously like a mecca for sports, but for women's sports in particular, there's really a lot of opportunity.
I echo the sentiment. And, one thing that I want to call out, and Dustin, this will naturally drift into you, is, what's really exciting about the women's sports is that each phase from, youth to, sort of secondary, what we'll call the collegiate market right now, and then the extension into the professional world, there is so much opportunity for not just sports tech, but I know we have service partners that are coming on here. I know that we have, I believe a water company that is looking to come in. These leagues are not unraveling a bunch of old behavior. They're building from a clean foundation. And so I think that the tendency is to look like, how do we continue to grow and develop here in the US, but also learn how to become a global entity. And if we look at what's going on with flag football, which ties back to LA 28, it's one call out that I want to go and say, like, that is a tremendous ecosystem that everyone should be paying attention, as it's an international sport. It is, both genders are playing it in the Olympics, and we're watching a true new ecosystem get built out. And so the propensity to bring in new partners, to tell more dynamic stories, and leverage sort of each phase of the ecosystem is wide open right now. So that's not necessarily partnering with the Chargers or the Dodgers, but it could be material for your business, and you could be a part of where the sport landscape is evolving to, not just where it's at today. So I just wanted to call that out. Now, Dustin, I'm going to come up to you. You sitting in your role, get to see so many different companies pitch. I want to stay less away from the mechanics of, what the actual product or service is, but I'd love for you to give us a little insight from the investor lens on tips, advice for founders that are, looking to break into the US market to meet prospective investors, and what resonates on sharing the story from, success they've had outside of the US market, and then blending that into opportunities where there are real upsides, for an investor to have a real look at them. Any insight that you could share from your institutional lens there would be super helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's a little, I mean, culturally there's some differences. Also, first, I'm like fanboying hardcore that Jamie Messler's on this call. I apologize. I have my phone out. I'm taking notes. Like, I can't see everybody, but like, Jamie's like one of the OGs in sports and media. Like, Players Tribune, when I first started getting into venture, was the first business I pitched to BDMI, and like, anyway, you guys are super lucky to have her on. Like, this is incredible. So I just want to add an extra plug there. So I'm a huge fan, but sorry, I'll get your autograph afterward. I know that's professional. But to Scott's point, I think, look, there's a ton of pools of capital in the US. There's a massive, I think I saw a chart the other day, I think it's one Andrew put out, that the spend per capita on sports in the US is the highest in the world. I think it's number 2 in Australia, but it's the highest in the world, and it's across whatever we have, 375 million people, 350 million people. So there's a ton of money. And so which is a double-edged sword. It's very easy to get people interested because people like sports. I played sports growing up. Like, it's very visceral. Like, everyone had a youth sports experience. Everyone has fandom experiences. You tie so much of who you are back to sports and this storytelling, and it has a much stronger pull than maybe something else that, I don't know, HVAC or something like that, right? Like, and no offense to anyone doing HVAC, I think they're fantastic businesses. But I think knowing that investors are going to like that, but in the US, it's pretty quickly, because of the amount of capital that's come in, it's starting to get pretty institutionalized. So it's not just, hey, I have an idea, hey, this is 10% better, hey, this is going to help with analytics, or hey, this has helped with fan engagement. Like, pretty quickly, people in the US move from, okay, this is interesting, to, okay, so how does it drive revenue, or how does it save me costs? Like, it's a very quick, like, what have you done for me lately type relationship, especially because there's so much capital in the US, there's so many companies pitching, like, investors context switch very, very quickly. So I think when you're going into these conversations and when you're talking to investors, it's very easy to get caught up on, this is my product, this is what I'm building, and which makes sense, right? Like, that's what you're doing day in, day out, and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into this. But very quickly, especially in the US, people just want to get to, like, okay, so what does this do for me? What does this mean, right? Because at the end of the day, the investor is running their business. Yes, they want to see companies succeed, but the way that their companies succeed, the way that they put food on their table, is by investing in companies that drive really nice outcomes, right? And they return money to their investors. So just like you are trying to drive success for your customers, they're trying to drive success for their customers. So it's very quickly, I think, when I'm talking to, less experienced founders, or certainly founders coming from other places culturally, it can be a little bit jarring to sort of, like, have someone tell, like, this is what I built, this is my life's work, and they're like, okay, so how much money are you making? Like, why should I care? Right? And that's a very American point of view. And we could probably do better to soften that, but that's just how a lot of investors react. So I think it's everything from, like, in the pitch and how you're talking to, if you're in front of teams and leagues or anyone like that, it's very quickly, like, how can you solve my problem for me quickly? And what does that mean? Because there's so much noise that people are trying to filter very, very quickly. And so I think the quicker you can get to that, the better.
Dustin, one follow-on question for you here, and then Chase, I'm going to come and we're going to spend a significant amount of time on the collegiate ecosystem. But Dustin, you get pitched by companies all day, every day. The inbox is full. As founders are looking to go ahead and book meetings with investors like Profluence, are there any tips or tricks you would give when reaching out, rooms to be in, places to show up, to try and help shrink the gap, besides the subtle plug of everyone's going to be joining Profluence, where all of this greatness happens? Is there any other insight that you would share to someone that might be overwhelmed, looking at all of the capital and opportunities in the US to try and cut through the noise?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And people always default to warm intros. And I think that makes sense for a number of reasons, but I kind of want to explain why. It goes to a volume question, and people in their day are looking for, especially investors are looking for, like, hey, I have 24 hours in the day and I'm talking to all these companies. I'm not going to see everything. What are the highest likelihood things that I can see? And how do I scale that? Right? Like, I certainly with AI and that sort of thing, and as things start to automate, there's some things you can do to try to scale yourself. But a lot of times the warm intro is less about, like, hey, can you get to me? I'm trying to hide, and more about who can validate what you're doing without me having to put in a bunch of work up front. Right.
Yep.
And so we always think about, even when we're raising capital, we think about, you think about, who do you partner with? Who do you, what are who are the logos you share? Who are your reference customers? Like, that means a lot, because it implies a certain quality of product, right? Like, I think about when we talk to sports businesses all the time, selling into the major sports leagues in the US, like, the teams are pretty terrible customers. Like, they squeeze you on price and they're not going to spend a lot, and they have a ton of pricing power. But everyone goes after them, because if you can say, hey, the Lakers are a customer, the Lakers are using this, or the Dodgers are using this, it means something to the rest of the market. And so I think thinking about how you can draft off of other people's credibility. Not that you're not credible, but you're not known, right? Like if I want to get in front of, Scott Garber, how can I draft off of someone that he knows or something that he's interested in, that gets me an attention or a hook? And it's so much of it is human behavior, I think, and it's thinking through those things, right?
Really well said. And Chase, I'm going to come over to you. We're going to spend a little time on name, image, and likeness. And to piggyback Dustin's point, like how should we be thinking about as an international entity showing up and how to leverage what's going on in the collegiate ecosystem to try and help commercialize what we're doing, drive case studies, and really leverage this opportunity of athletes engaging with brands like they've never really had the chance to before. Maybe before we answer that, Chase, if you could just give us a high level overview of what is name, image, and likeness, and the brief evolution of it, I think that would be really helpful for all of our international folks, because it's quite confusing and clunky even for us here in the States. So if you could give us your best sort of rendition of that, and then we'll unpack how to utilize it, that would be super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And quickly to kind of like piggyback off what Dustin was saying about how to get in front of investors, because for me, I raised capital for my business, Icon Source. We raised a pre-seed, a seed, a Series A, and a Series B. I think it's really important that you network yourself to get those warm intros, because if you're not able to create a network, you're not going to be able to scale and build a company. And I think like people are always like, who can introduce me to this? Who can introduce me to that person? I think you got to build those connections, and there's ways to do it. And I just think that that's very, very critical, because then you get those warm intros. So I just wanted to let like that be heard as somebody that's like, you have to find a way to get in front of people. And then moving into NIL, it's a really interesting time because, like I said, you can get in early with a
Did his French internet cut out?
Yeah.
We were rolling so strong. Starlink was really helping us out there. All right, we might have to come back to my man Chase when his bandwidth picks back up. I can sort of fill in the gaps while Chase is buffering there, but I think NIL is going through a tremendous shake right now, and the way that we have watched it evolve over the last 5 years is traditionally athletes were not able to earn under the amateur status in the collegiate sport ecosystem. There's been several bills that have been passed that have incrementally allowed athletes to navigate this ecosystem along with universities to start to earn money on their name, image, and likeness. The business that Chase built was one of the first renditions of it, where it was a two-sided marketplace for for college athletes and brands to be able to connect and execute these deals in a compliant way. As we've watched the evolution of the college ecosystem and the professionalization of it, it's now allowed athletes to earn money from the school while also still executing these marketing deals to bolster their position and earn from the platform they've built. As a byproduct of that, the space has completely professionalized, which is really exciting. And we're watching a lot of institutional capital move into college sports, which is now creating more surface area for founders, investors, and service partners to come in and not just focus on the traditional big four properties that we know or the big college programs we know. It opens up, if we go to LA, it opens up schools like a Loyola or a Chapman, where now we're able to go ahead and start to gain early traction with our products. We're able to find champion users, execute a strategy to go ahead and break into the market where there is a propensity or a hunger for these programs to find ways for their athletes to test new products and to be able to go ahead and earn some marketing dollars. But we found it as a really, really nice way to go ahead and get into the market that sits between youth sports and pro sports, and build a whole strategy around it. Chase, it looks like you've buffered a little bit. I went ahead, I took a stab at explaining the NIL ecosystem. I don't know if you heard any of it. So listeners, if this is a little redundant, I think it would be really cool for Chase to explain the NIL ecosystem and see if I was anywhere close to how you would explain it. We'll give this one more shot, Chase.
Sorry, guys. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, like Scott said, it's essentially the same thing that's been in every pro sport contract I ever did, but nobody talked about it. It was you have the right as a brand to leverage the name, image, and likeness of an individual. And now a whole entire industry is called NIL, which is kind of funny. But it's really just gives you an option to work with a much broader, earlier based talent platform that's still discovering themselves. It's unknown. It allows brands to build with an individual. You can work with someone before they've hit their peak value. And so it's been really exciting. We've seen female athletes have done an incredible job. Since none of these athletes have really established themselves, it's really important to lean into the ones that want to really build their brand and respond to these opportunities and create their personal presence. And so we've seen female athletes are very eager to lean into this. Maybe not categorically always the truth, but overall that's been a consistent theme that we've seen come together. And so the female athletes on Icon Source have definitely earned the most dollars from true commercial partnerships and drive the most value from that as well. But yeah, it's a super exciting time. I've obviously coming from Red Bull, I've worked with young athletes my whole time, from snowboarders to Olympic athletes. And so now working with collegiate athletes is very similar. I think there's a huge blue space for brands to be really creative here. People typically want to come in and they think that if an individual posts a picture or a video using a product that everybody's going to buy it. But I think you really need to use that individual to create credibility and trust to inspire consumers. I think that's tremendously lacking, partially because the incentives behind most of the capital moving into the NIL space is more of pay to play and not as much of true commercial opportunities. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the space. It's not been leveraged to really see how brands can drive more activity.
No, really well said. And, I mean, I think it's moving very fast. And so I'm going to just sort of come over top of this first segment and say that, this sports is still completely and very reliant on the relationship business. And so when we start to transition into what's going on in LA with the World Cup and the Olympics a couple of years out, I think that so much is how can we think about our businesses partnering, but also how do we take advantage of the global footprint converging into LA to meet the right folks and leverage the compounding behaviors in order to go ahead and work our way up to some of the larger global entities like the Dodgers or the Rams or, some of these, commercial giants. And when we show up the right way with the ability to actually go ahead and transact with them in a meaningful way. Jamie, I want to come over to you, and I know you have a hard stop here at the top of the hour, so I want to make sure that we understand, where your, attention is, as we look at LA, you're based in LA, and we also have a participant, our director at Growth, Chad Eichten, who everyone will get connected with after the call. He's in LA as well, to make sure that you guys grow your network. Jamie, give us a little insight with the Olympics and FIFA. Well, I guess FIFA, then Olympics. How are you showing up at these events, or the surrounding events? And if you were giving advice to somebody that was looking to network or get into the right rooms, what would that be to make sure they maximize what's, the tentpole moment that's actually happening, coming up here in a few weeks?
No, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of it's been kind of even touched on with regards to networking and trying to meet people where they are. I think it's a relationship business. So like coming, whether it's with warm introductions, finding commonality, coming up with like where can you be helpful to people, I think also is like not just wanting something, like where it's a relationship business. I've been in this business a long time, and I think where business starts to really thrive is when people are helping each other. In LA, I think it's important to really plan in advance, because you want to stay in the right part of the city, depending on the meetings that you're having. It's just important to understand, if you're staying in Santa Monica, you're not going to want to have a million meetings in West Hollywood. So it's just from a logistics standpoint, important to plan. But it's funny. Like I am networking all the time. I'm raising money all the time. I'm building relationships and community. I'm not as in person as I used to be, but every single time I am, I'm amazed at how much more progress, how much more relationships are being built, and how much better it is. So I just think it's important to plan ahead. There is a ton going on, so it's thinking about where you're going to get the most opportunity to maximize your time. And again, there's just, in sports, you can't find a better place, with every single sport is here. And so there's no shortage of events. So it's really just about planning and starting that networking now, and starting to figure out, like, if you can have a home base at a nice hotel in a central part of the city and try to book as many meetings as possible. I think that's a really good way, versus being in the car every 20 minutes.
I couldn't agree. That is spoken by someone who's lived in LA for a while now. Look at networking, I think will continue to come up, especially, when we think about the value of this call. We're going to send this around, but you're getting a lot of, really good insights from us. But it's the art of the follow-up. It's using these moments to be able to go ahead and find folks like Jamie. So when you come in, Chifa and team does an amazing job of helping bridge the gaps. But now this is the accelerants to get you into the ecosystem, with the folks that are writing more of those angel checks or doing the partnership deals, not so, just relying on what government entities are doing and, who they're connecting you with. So I encourage everybody to be able to take this. And if there's one takeaway, it's the humans that are on this call that will help you navigate the landscape. Andrew, I want to come over to you, as a thought leader in the space. Networking is one thing, but it's like when we show up there, it's making sure that we understand where the space is at, and more importantly, where the space is going, and weaving a narrative that our product or service is included in there. I'm curious, when you're keeping up and learning about sports, what are some of the resources that you point to inform you on opinions and decisions that you make within Profluence?
Yeah, and mine's probably a little disjointed than a lot of people, but every morning I get Google Alerts set up to read the news. So I read it like a newspaper across the sports industry. And then we do a lot of podcasts as well. And so I get a lot of my insights from that, from conversations from like today. So I already have some stuff jotted down from Jamie and Chase and Dustin, of just like, hey, here are things other people are thinking about. I need to dig a little bit deeper. And then I actually do a lot of reading and listen to podcasts on runs or whatever in other industries, and try to tie it back to sports and go, hey, they're doing this in AI, or this is happening in robotics, or this is the state of media. What are takeaways to bring back to what we're doing or what we're building? And so I think I do a pretty good job connecting the dots between it. But I'd say, like, you want to I think of content as like super, there's like a broad, if you think of it like a circle, the big wide circle is all the external other things, and you try to narrow it in around a specific topic. And then to me, and it sort of goes back to the question earlier about content, like go be very sophisticated in one area, or I can talk NIL and name, image, and likeness to a 98 and 99th percentile, but Chase is that extra 1%. So I'm always trying to find who are those people that live in the 1% in betting or media or NIL or fan engagement or selling to teams. And then as you start to know those people, they then have a lot of the networks that can get you to the next level. So for me, I would say like go become a 1%er in whatever your core business is, but don't just sell people or tell people about your product or service. Really educate them on, say you do fan engagement of like, here's the state of the space, here's where it's going, here's the trends I'm seeing. And then people naturally start to go, well, okay, you seem to be the expert in this. How are you solving it? Right. And so that's how I would approach a lot of this, is around that.
Perfect. No, I think it's being a student of the game, especially when you're trying to break into a new market, is so imperative. So when we get the opportunity to pitch a strategic partner, or we get the opportunity to get into the rooms with folks that are allocating capital, it's leaving them with, well, one, being educated on the space, informing them on, how things are done in the Netherlands and where your product or service is used around the rest of the world, and then having an opinion on where the space is going. And I think that's where a lot of folks fall flat. It's just, it's being so singularly focused on the product that or service that you're performing, and not having a full overview of the space. I'm going to go sort of round robin one more time. Guys, I dropped it in the chat there. This is always like pulling teeth or going to the dentist, but after we get one question, I promise that a few more will roll. Please don't be shy. If you have a question, you have thought experts and leaders in the US market on the call right now, please drop them in there. We want to be vulnerable, off market, and give you the real to be able to address your comments or thoughts. So please don't hesitate to drop that in the chat there. Chase, I want to come up to you real quick, right? As we think about, building out the capital stack and leveraging athletes. It's been, that's not something that's unique to America, but we've watched it, be done in really great ways and in really poor ways. I'm curious, any insight or thoughts you would have as international companies from the Netherlands are looking to break into the US market on partnering or getting athletes to invest to try and help cement their position here in the US. Any thoughts or insights on that you would share on how it could put them in a advantageous position as they break into the market? Oh, all right. Well, and we're just going to skip Chase. He just dropped that in the chat there. He's got poor connections. If you do have questions, email him. Stay on mute there, Chase. We'll keep rolling. Dustin Dries, I'm going to come over to you. Sort of same thing, right? And I was going to go a little bit more on the strategic advisory board, set up, right? And so, like, as we start to think about, capital formation, I'm curious, when you look at advisors, right, and you break into the U.S. market, what advice would you give folks that are looking to penetrate the market on selecting advisors to try and help them break into different vertical sectors under the sports umbrella?
Yeah, I think the first thing I think about when it comes to advisors is, and everyone will say this, but like, your company equity matters. And so really, really sort of vet out who these people are and be completely upfront, like, this is what I want out of you as an advisor. And make sure they know that. One, because I think it's always good to set expectations and everything, but two, because it also helps them align and start thinking. I think your advisors can be a great offensive tool for you that you don't have to manage every day. And so if you're close with your advisors and hey, I have an advisor that works at the NFL league office because of XYZ. That's great, but it's like, are they able to ultimately help you deliver or get you in contact with the people that you need? And so I think it's understanding how they map, and ideally, map out like, hey, best case scenario, what does this person get you? Right. Like, and have that in your head, and then map that around sort of, whether it's concentric circles or whatever it is, around the different areas of your business that you need the most help with. Right. I wouldn't don't just hire 3 people from 3 leagues because you're like, well, I want to get customers in all 3 leagues. Like, you're probably good in terms of the insight. You're probably good with one person that's at one of the leagues that can give you insight across the leagues and make sure they're well connected. But maybe you need help in thinking through, okay, how do I engage corporate sponsors on something? Then get some from the corporate sponsorship world. So I would definitely pack those. You pack that advisory board with differing expertise that helps fill out where you lack.
And I think that could be an absolute cheat code that I think sometimes is overlooked, especially when we start to think about, an international approach and breaking into new markets, having those aligned stakeholders to try and help us break into some of these new arenas. We have found to be a really strong and efficient signal to send to investors and folks that we're looking to strategically partner with. Jamie Messler, we have a question from Eric, and then I think this will be probably the last one, and then we'll let you get onto your day and we'll continue to field the rest of the questions. Eric, appreciate the love on the session. His question is, best practices to connect with non-professional and non-collegiate women athletes in the greater LA or California, affluent 30 plus, who perform health and community are important. What are some playbooks that are proven to work? Jamie Messler, any insights on, WISE or some of these other groups that we could point Eric in the direction of?
That's a good question. Chad, I think, would probably have some, because he works with a lot of those networks that are post-college or non-college athletes. There are a million communities in LA, so that's a really good question. I think it just needs a little research because there's a community for almost everything here, and social media is going to be your best bet to really dig in and find, whether it's through Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn. But I think Chad would have a really good answer for that.
I love it. And Jamie, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day. Everybody, I encourage, connect with Jamie Messler on LinkedIn. Let her know that you were in this session. Jamie, we'll catch up here soon. Thank you again for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Jamie.
guys.
Awesome. All right. And then there were 3 of us, the lonely lads at Profluence. Eric, I'm going to double down on that. There's a gentleman, Chad Eichten, who I mentioned, but there are a lot of really unique communities. We're watching groups like Athletes Touch, which focus on former athletes that, sort of draft off of the, post playing days in that range that you're looking for. I think that, to me, it's finding a couple really strong anchors. And then, the introduction game is everything. And so especially in LA, New York, Miami, some of these larger networks, it's, finding, you don't have to go boil the ocean, but finding 1 or 2 that are trusted that then can make strategic introductions. And that's what, Chad has been able to orchestrate. I'm going to give this shameless plug, and we're going to drop the link here for everybody. But, that's what we built Profluence for. What you guys are experiencing as you break into the US, I just want you to know that US based companies are experiencing the same trials and tribulations. And, we believe that being, educated, having the right access, and then having the right intel is the concoction that you'll need in order to be able to go ahead and show up with these rooms with precision, and help shape what the future of sport looks like. So Eric, we'll make sure that you get connected to Chad. We'll make sure that you get access into our community, and then excited to learn more about the product that you're building or service you're building, to target this group. Gentlemen, I'm going to go round.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, just quickly on that. One of the things I think about in these communities is if you can really hone in on your ICP, And sometimes that's, I'm not saying you use an influencer strategy, but you figure out like, this is the kind of person. And like the deeper and tighter you go on that, you start with that person or that, this is what that ICP looks like. And then you just kind of start to build, like explore their ecosystem. Like, where do you spend time? What do you do? What does that look like? You know what I mean? I think that's another way to really, really start understanding on a deeper level these sub communities that can be super, super powerful, right? And it just make riches. And so I think there's an opportunity there.
Absolutely. One thing, just sort of in the vein of community, and this is a little non-traditional, but you'll learn that's very much my MO, is, sports has like similar properties of creating IP and building fandom and, really capturing first person data, which makes it really attractive for, sponsors and really sort of the mechanics of where business is going. And so I would encourage a lot of folks to look into the emerging sport market. And Andrew, I'm going to lean into you on this, just to speak on some of the tips and tricks, or best practices when looking at the amount of new leagues that are popping up here in the US. Everything from disc golf to fixed gear biking to robot fighting. Give us some insights if you're looking to break into these leagues where you see typical gaps that folks could show up and strike commercial partnerships or gain adoption with their product or service.
Yeah, and we put out it took a while, but we broke down the whole US sports league through a market map, and I think there was 80 or 90 companies on there. And how we filtered it was they at least raised some sort of round or had some, level of viability. There's probably actually 200 to 300. But I look at it from like, so the actual team or league is just the center of a flywheel, right? And that's why I think sports is getting so much more interest. They're actually now becoming platforms, and so they look more like media and technology companies, these teams and leagues, where the actual viewing experience or the live in-person experience is just the center, and that is only a few hours of time. It's everything around it. And so start to think about what else do they need, and that's where you can look to the traditional leagues as well and be like, hey, what else do they do to service their fans, to service their customers, and start to find gaps in that, right? So, I mean, I'll just use a few more tangible examples. But if you look at, for example, there's something called the World Curling League, World Curling Group. And so they're a pro curling league, and they raised 10 million or so. But to actually build all these things out, it's easier for them to go spend money on a product or a service or a company that can do what a whole team would have to do at the NBA or NHL. And so, for example, like they use a group called Pressbox that automates all their media content. And so instead of spending $1 million to have a whole editorial team like an NBA or NHL would have, they are able to automate it, right? Or for data analytics, the NBA and NHL and these teams can do a lot of that in-house. They'll have whole scouting departments of 20 people. Okay, well, what's your solution that is able to, take that off their plate? And then again, the beauty of this strategy is even if, say, the curling group goes out of business, well, in theory, if you have 30 other clients, then you're good, right? And that's why we talk about the picks and shovels are interesting a lot, which is what I believe a lot of you are building. You're not reliant on just the league or the team succeeding. There's still the breadth of so many other ones you can service. And so then how do you say you get the curling group, now you take the curling group and you go to, the next emerging league, whether it's rodeo or equestrian or fencing or whatever it is, and start to, pitch them on the same type of service. So a lot more nuance to that, but that's how I think about it from that standpoint.
No, really, really interesting. Dustin, anything you want to add to that? Or I mean, I think Andrew hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, I'm not gonna compete with Andrew on media. So
Sweet. No, that's good stuff. So look at Michael. I think you ask a really, really good question here. We're gonna go sort of round robin. Dries, I might start with you because you sort of come from the youth side with streaming, understanding each layer of sort of this nexus of sustainability, sports, and sponsorships. Sort of curious, what are your thoughts on where it sits now, where it's evolving to? Any thoughts to Michael's question there?
Yeah, I think look, it's increasingly become I'll say, taking a step back, in the US, things definitely come and go in waves. And so there's certain things that are just more part of the public zeitgeist that people start to care about more than others, and a lot of times that's dictated by sports or pop culture or something like that. Around sustainability and those sorts of things, right? And so I think some of that is understanding, hey, is a potential customer, or someone I'm trying to, the client, are they really, is this really part of who they are, or is this sort of a flavor of the month type thing? And so I think increasingly, especially sponsors are seeing real ROI from being involved in more sustainable type opportunities. They're seeing that their consumer base responds to that. And I hate to just be the capitalist, but when they see that, it obviously drives a change of behavior. So I think it's really thinking deeply about what are they saying versus what are they doing, and how does that intersect, and understanding again, like, who are there. There's certain sports that, like, I think about, like, I grew up in Southern California surfing, and so late at night I'll watch some of the World Surfing League events. The World Surfing League aligns very, very well with sustainability, and their sponsorship aligns very well with sustainability, and the brands that appeal to them. Sustainability is a real piece of what they're doing, right? And so that's much more compelling because it fits sort of endemically with the brand and what they're building than maybe something like I don't know. I hate to generalize, like a NASCAR, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't want to. So I think you really have to understand the end base of the property or the customer and how they're thinking about things. Everyone has these things, but it does require kind of some deeper research.
Yeah, and I'm gonna come in with sort of my hot take on this. Sort of where the white space exists right now. We're seeing youth sports, and I think youth sports there it touches a lot of really unique principles, right? Where we're able to go ahead and we're watching brands move in for the first time to start to capture the future consumer being the athlete, but also the sideline economy, which is the mom, and they're being built at the center of these communities. And so I think this is a unique place where we're able to go ahead and drive real returns from a sponsor lens, and not just slap a name on a building or a jersey patch, but actually start to build brand affinity and alliance across the entire spectrum for a fraction of the cost. And I think as we continue to professionalize the US ecosystem, we're going to watch more and more opportunities like this present themselves, where does it make as much sense to go and do a jersey patch sponsor of LAFC, or to go ahead and start to become the official fill in the blank for the ECNL youth soccer clubs that have hundreds of thousands of participants every day that are showing up at the field. I think that's when we start to unpack where the youth market is going, that's where we can go ahead and gain market adoption. It's way more fragmented, and I have to drill down on this. I'm learning just as much as you guys probably learn from us, but when we think about youth development, it's very structured in Europe. and there's not all of these private leagues that exist. And I think one of the blessings and the curse of the US market is that it's quite fragmented, so it makes it way easier to go ahead and penetrate the market. It makes it way harder to scale, whereas I believe in Europe it's a lot harder to penetrate, but once you do, then you have the pipeline all the way up to the national team, and it becomes a really good opportunity. So I would start to think about, like, if you're not using a youth strategy from an exposure standpoint, a sponsor standpoint, an activation or partnership, I would highly, highly encourage it, as like that's where we're seeing a lot of capital and white space for the next wave of sport and sports tech, sports infrastructure, sports brands to come in and really earn their place in the market. So just want to double down. Pro sports is awesome. College sports is incredible. There's a lot of change. Youth sport is where all the volume lives, and there's a massive, massive opportunity that I think gets overlooked when we look at folks from the Netherlands, Ireland, Australia trying to break into the U.S. market, just because it's a little bit different than your guys' development system. Dries, I saw you come off mute there. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to double click that point, because I think it's completely right. Until somewhat recently, just because of technology and globalization, the reach of the world, like the people, everyone sort of knew, hey, people are spending money in youth sports. It's a very different market in the US. There's a ton of people, but it was so hyper fragmented that you couldn't do anything about it. And so just by default, the leagues, just were it's media scale and mass. So they're like, okay, if I can get in front of millions of people, I'm going to go to one of the big 30 teams in the NBA or the NFL or whatever. Now you can do it in such a more cash efficient level. And that's what I think is interesting, is you've seen some brands that can come through, call them niche brands that can come through, and you don't need 5 million customers. You need 1,000, right? And in some areas of really heavy spend, that's a lot easier to do with a much more niche strategy. And so I think that opens the opportunity to really being, I don't even want to say creative, but just being efficient with capital.
Yep, I totally agree. And that's the exciting part about this right now, is what worked 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. It's level set, guys. Everyone is trying to figure out what the frontier of sport looks like in the US market, from youth to college to pro, and then all the opportunities that surround this ecosystem, which in the age of AI feels sort of like the last frontier of live entertainment, and what actually makes us human. So let's go ahead. Rick, you got one question. Let's go ahead. At the Intuit Dome with the LA Clippers, we're already powering a branded activation around real-time crowd sound response. What we're learning is that new in-stadium formats don't scale through teams, they scale with sponsors buy-in first. So from your perspective, how do you successfully sell and package a new sponsorship category to brands in the US so it becomes repeatable inventory across the franchise? It's a great question. Andrew, I'm gonna punt to you. Any insights or thoughts on the packaging to be able to scale?
Yeah, I mean, I have sort of an idea around it, and I don't know, it might be a good one. It might not be as relevant. I don't know, the ins and outs of what you're doing or how you're thinking about it. But if you could create some sort of benchmark around it, or, some index. So you see, and I'm just relating this to something Arctos did. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but they own a lot of the stakes in teams across the NBA. Like, they've taken the 5 and 10% stakes, but they went to the University of Michigan and created an index for like sports team valuations and ownership. And so anyway, is there maybe an idea to do something around like the fan energy index, or I don't know, like, can you create something else where you can say, hey, here's what we've done with the Intuit Dome. We're sort of indexing this. We have our insights, we have our education. Like, we want to do this other places. It seems like a really interesting way to get people excited as well. you're coming with not, hey, we did this here, we want to do this here, but also like, hey, look at these insights, or look at this index, or look at this, other stuff we've done around it. And then as much, and it ties to data, right? As much data you can get around it from, what's the brand awareness? How much engagement are you getting? What's the social amplification look like? So I don't know, just some random thoughts without knowing too many of the other details.
I think you're spot on, Andrew. And, I mean, a lot of the conversations we've been having, whether it's with, Deloitte Converge or a YieldMo, or, like some of these platforms that are or ticketing platforms, they're trying to understand the user, and the end user, the folks that are in the seats at the game. They're trying to get better structured data on the folks that are engaging at the game, and then what is the behavior as they engage with the property or the brand beyond it. I think one of the things that's most interesting when we start to talk about sound, it's the emotional connection to it. And so, to Andrew's point, if we're able to tie it back to a connectivity to the brand and actually show some kind of ROI, or show some kind of deeper sentiment or analysis around understanding the fan in a more dynamic way, I think that makes it very easy to meet the sponsor where they're at, and then actually serve the end user, being the team, more data rich insights, which gets you stickier within the org there. And so I think that there's actually two opportunities as the teams are starting to go internal and look at solutions to go ahead and understand their users and ticket buyers in a more intimate way. How do we drive more engagement both at the game and post game? And then ultimately that leads to the sponsor or platform that I think you can package this up and sell to repeatedly once you have a couple of these case studies like the Intuit Dome. So data is everything. And it's no longer just the volume of data, it's the structure of data and the sentiment analysis that we're able to derive from it to get to know our end user in a more intimate way. That's where I think there could be some really cool opportunities. Again, not just knowing a ton about the business, but that's some of the trends that we're hearing with platforms like this.
Yeah, I have an interesting example, and this isn't what you're doing, and is on a much smaller scale. But I went to college in Utah at BYU, and there was a local bakery that had a partnership that if BYU scored over 90 points in a game, you could go that night to the bakery and get a free piece of chocolate cake. And so, 90 points at that point in college basketball wasn't like super common, but it could happen. But if you started getting close, like when it got to like 86 or 87 and it was the end of the game, even if they were winning by 40, like fans would just start chanting, like 20,000 people, like, "We want cake. We want cake. We want," right. And like, I remember the name of that place today. It's Maggleby's Bakery. I know exactly what it is. Their chocolate cake is fantastic. Every person that has been to a BYU basketball game will know what I'm talking about. And like, they did not spend a massive amount of money for that, but it became a moment that they were able to do. And so some of it is just pairing it up with the right, pairing the right sponsor with the right activation, right? But it's just an example that I hadn't thought of for a while, but now I'm hungry.
Well, no, I'm gonna sort of press my foot on the gas there, where now the demand in getting into the Intuit Dome. And, I mean, Rick, I'm really excited to learn more what you're doing with OSU and the Big Ten around the energy. But now it's connecting that back to an experiential moment. And I think we're watching the demand for that happen in a really, really unique way. And so to Dustin's point, before it was if there was a hat trick or you had 9 strikeouts, you got a free sub. I would think about how do we gamify this and actually tie it to real KPIs and real metrics to go ahead and show that. And then, Rick, I'm going to bring this whole thing full circle, is there's fanatical fans at these youth sport facilities, right? And so don't only think about the Intuit Dome, but how are we starting to drive and capture that same analysis when we have hundreds of thousands of parents coming through a grand park every year in Indiana, and they're screaming on the sideline? I think there's a tremendous opportunity to go downstream, and again, connect it to local business. Then you can go ahead and tie NIL athletes into it. And now all of a sudden you're using your product and starting to vertically integrate and create a solution from youth to college, college to pro. And that becomes a value add far beyond just the product that you're bringing to said sponsor. So I think so much of this is how do we use our product or service to build bridges and start to become a one, a vertical pillar within sports as we show up, to add value to multiple stakeholders: Intuit, sponsor, team, fan, and now all of a sudden we're really sticky glue, and it makes it a lot harder to go ahead and pull us out of it. Rick, great question though. That's awesome. I'm really excited to learn more. Guys, we have 5 minutes left. If are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to turn the corner. We're going to bring this thing home. Guys, on behalf of Profluence, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for everyone who's building in the sporting industry. There is a great responsibility that comes with this, as I believe and we believe that sports is this amazing parallel to life where we develop humans, and we want to continue to make money, and then we want to continue to expand perspective. But there's a great responsibility that goes when it comes to building in this ecosystem. So a massive thank you. Last plug from our side is we're going to be sending a recap email. Chifa is going to be sending that email. We're going to include the one pager that was a little blurry, but you'll be able to digest it. Also going to send over a couple newsletters that are in line with NIL and the rise of women's sports so that you guys can understand and learn from our perspective. And we dropped the link in here to Profluence. If you are building in sports, we try to price this at a point that is digestible for the founder, the operator. It's $50 USD, but it is your home base. It is your community of all of the personas that will help you get your business or initiative to the next level. Highly encourage everyone checking it out. We're doing weekly digital programs, networking, education, all to go ahead and make sure we have a better, more thriving sports ecosystem. Chifa, that's all we got from our side. You take us home, and we just can't thank you enough for giving us the stage to talk about what we're doing over here in the US.
Yes, thank you so much, Scott. I just wanted to take the time to have a very genuine thank you to you and the Profluence team for this great session. Very insightful. I learned a lot, and I know the companies learned a lot as well. Thank you to the participants for joining in and asking such interesting questions. And we'll see you for the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one. Talk soon.